All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is the daily vlog 2026, number 25. We're almost done with the first month of 2026, folks. So, today, I have discovered something interesting. I've mentioned this before. In the US, and I believe in most of Europe as well, Dungeons and Dragons is the most popular tabletop RPG ever. It has always been the most popular TTRPG ever. Even that time where Paizo tried to claim that it outsold did a D&D, it didn't. It's some faulty numbers and a little bit of manipulation there. They didn't actually really outsold D&D. Everybody else is fighting for second place. And that's how it's always been. However, when you get to different markets, especially markets where English is not either the primary language or the most common secondary language. And by most common, I mean a large enough portion of the population speaks it that you can speak exclusively English in these countries and still be able to get around relatively well. Which is true of a lot of Europe. And nowadays, because English is a trade language, there are quite a few larger cities. I don't know if you could count entire countries. There are quite a few larger cities, like if you go to, I believe Tokyo, you can get along perfectly fine speaking exclusively English. Since a large portion of the Japanese population speaks at least some English. I believe, I'm not sure about Beijing, but Hong Kong, I believe as well. You can speak English, though a lot of that has to do with the fact that Hong Kong was a British, whatever you call it, the British owned Hong Kong for really long time. So they colonized specifically Hong Kong, and then the rest of China they didn't. Not not through lack of trying. Anyway, once you get out of places that are primarily English speaking, which is what Dungeons and Dragons is written in, it's the primary language it's designed for. Things change. I had a rude awakening. I don't know, maybe a couple years ago. I don't think it was last year. Anyway, there was an announcement that D&D was going to stop translating their books into Portuguese. More likely than not because of low sales of the Portuguese editions of the book. And I saw, like, literally everyone all over Twitter is like, oh, so you just don't care about Brazil, do you? And my response to that was, oh, this is a bunch of Americans that don't understand how the rest of the world works. The U.S. is one of a very small minority of countries where the vast majority of the population is primarily monolingual, meaning that they only speak one language. Most of Europe, kids are bilingual, adults are bilingual, at least partially. Japan, like I mentioned, most people are bilingual, at least conversationally in English, or I'm not sure how popular other languages like Chinese or any of the other Asian languages are over there, because Japan and China have history. But China, most people are minimum bilingual with this because China has so many different languages. Even something like Cantonese isn't a language. Cantonese is a collection of languages that are close enough that even if you don't speak the same language, there's enough words in common that you can generally understand each other. So yeah, China, most people, especially once you get into the more educated areas, like higher education, stuff like that, most people are minimum bi or trilingual. But the U.S., vast portions of our population speak only one English, or speak only one language. That language is English, and they speak it poorly. And so I naturally assumed that Brazil would be like, because like Mexico, a lot of Mexicans are bilingual. Because they will speak the Mexican dialect of Spanish. Fun fact, Spanish is in Spanish from Spain, and Mexican Spanish are wildly different languages. In the same way that French, Canadian French, and Parisian French are very, very different languages. And somebody that speaks Parisian French will immediately be able to identify if you're speaking Canadian French to them, and vice versa. My understanding of Mexican Spanish, they tend to speak a little bit faster than Spain's Spanish. But anyway, so I assumed Brazil, like most of the rest of the developed world, most of their population would be bilingual. And I was 100% wrong. The vast majority, and by vast I mean upwards of 90% of Brazilians, speak primarily Portuguese. And apparently English, according to some Brazilian fans that were kind enough to educate me, apparently English tends to be a language that's really only learned by kind of like the upper class and higher educated and things like that. Like they'll teach it in universities and stuff like that. But it's expensive, and generally, if you're not kind of in the upper echelons of society, there's really no reason to learn it. Everything in Brazil is done in Portuguese. Because of that, the Brazilian tabletop RPG market is very different than the U.S. market, and D&D is not the most popular tabletop RPG in that market. Again, some Brazilian fans were kind enough to tell me a few of the more popular TTRPGs in Brazil. I have forgotten all of them, but understand, the U.S. is not the world. So, something that I've talked about quite a few different times on the channel is the fact, and I'm going to put fact in quotations now because I'm starting to second guess this fact. But in the Japanese market, D&D is not the number one. It's generally in the neighborhood of between 2 and 4. There's possibly, again, I'll get into why I'm not sure this is accurate anymore. And I do know I have at least one viewer in Japan. Grimmeth, I'm looking at you here. You might be able to give us a little bit more insight into this since you're actually there. But the number one TTRPG that is just accepted. Like I went and I tried to look for sales numbers. I cannot find sales numbers anywhere. I cannot find any concrete numbers for this. Everyone just accepts the fact that Call of Cthulhu is the number one tabletop RPG in Japan. And I, for the longest time, believe that as well. And I'm not 100% certain that it's wrong. I can't find any data to support that. And I have found one very, very anecdotal bit of data that actually disagrees with that. And so I thought it'd be interesting to kind of to talk about it, because also doing research for this video, I learned a few other things that I find really, really fascinating. And again, if I do have people that physically live in Japan or have lived in Japan that are watching this video, please, let us know what the real deal is. If you can find actual numbers, that would be super awesome. Again, I've tried. I don't speak Japanese in any way, shape, or form. I cannot read Japanese. And so I generally have to look at English-based sources for that information. And while, yes, there's a large portion of Japan that speaks English, sales numbers and stuff like that, all that stuff that's talking about it is going to be in Japanese. And they do use the kind of traditional Arabic number system that the same number system that the U.S. Uses, where 1, 2, 3, 4, like all that stuff. They do use that, but everything else in the article would be in Japanese, and the numbers don't mean anything without the words to tell you what the numbers mean. So I don't really have a way to kind of look this up other than using English sources, and the vast majority of the English-based sources I found don't give any numbers. They just go, yeah, it's Call of Cthulhu. It's because of replays. Which, again, I don't doubt. But, so anyway, I found this article on EN World. For anyone who doesn't know, EN World is an RPG. Well, their icon is EN World, RPG News and Reviews. When I was doing my RPG News Battle Map show, EN World was one of my sources that I would go to find primary sources. A lot of the stuff on EN World is technically secondary sources, where they're talking about an article on another website. And so I would use them as a secondary source, and then would actually go to the primary source to get my information for my stuff. Journalism is fun. So, there's an article, or it's technically, it's in their forums. And it was posted September 8th, 2022. So it's only about 4-ish years old, about 3.5 years old. But what it was there's this person there that was, well, here, I'll just read what they say. So, bopping around the internet, looking up some stuff for my Sword World thread, I came across this hyperlink. Very interesting page. I clicked on this hyperlink. It no longer goes to anything. It goes to a Japanese site that I think is says this page doesn't exist anymore. However, it's all in Japanese, and I couldn't get Chrome to translate it for me, so I don't actually know what it says. But it looks very similar to pages that go, oops, you've come to a page that doesn't exist, just using Japanese. So I can't confirm that any of this is accurate, but the fact that they linked to that page, they showed their source, in my opinion, means that this is probably an accurate copy from that page. So, going back, I came across this hyperlink, very interesting page. It's the website of a gaming cafe in Tokyo, and it has a ranking by year of the TTRPGs selected for play in the cafe going back to 2010. It's a wonderful snapshot of the Japanese RPG market through the years. Here's some selected stats. So, what this guy did is he actually looked at this thing and he showed the top 5 TTRPGs played in this particular cafe. Now, remember I said this is anecdotal evidence? If you're not familiar with the term, anecdotal evidence is just one instance of data as opposed to a large collection of data that you can actually take a meaningful, you can make a meaningful assumption from. An example of anecdotal evidence is the idea that smoking's bad for you. Everybody knows this, but somebody goes, my grandfather smoked every day since he was 14, and he lived to be 96. Well, that, assuming that's a true statement, that is a true statement, that is a true data point, but it's anecdotal evidence. It's probably an outlier, just a random piece of data that doesn't actually fit the norm. Outliers are a very, very normal thing in statistics and experimental design in general. Learning how to notice outliers and ignore them because they're just random freaks that don't need to flavor your data. That's anecdotal. So theoretically, this data might not be representative of the Japanese tabletop market. For whatever reason, The games that are the most popular here might be the most popular because for a number of reasons. It might be that during that time in Japan, they were the games that everybody was playing. And this is just a really good snapshot of Japanese cafe TTRPGs. Or in Japan, they just call them TRPGs. Found another fun fact. Apparently, in Japan, TRPG doesn't stand for tabletop RPG. It stands for table talk RPG. Because a lot of early RPGs were theater of the mind, and so it was talking at a table. I just found that interesting. Again, I'm not 100% certain that's absolutely valid. Again, a lot of this stuff is anecdotal evidence. But, again, you Japanese fans, if you want to clear some stuff up, I'd be very happy. So it might be that this is a good snapshot of the market as a whole. It also might be that these games are really popular because that's what the owner of this cafe was liked the most, and so they recommended it the most, or the staff recommended these games the most. It might have been these were the easiest games for them to be able to purchase enough for that people so that people could play them. You know, different print runs and availability and stuff like that can change things. And because this is a TRPG cafe, like their business model requires people coming in and being able to play the things. So it's possible that might have a thing. It's possible that this particular cafe was located in like a little America suburb or something like that, where there was just a lot of American based people, or their clientele was primarily from the US or primarily from Europe or something like that. So we cannot state empirically that this is 100% how the Japanese market worked. However, we can interpret from this data what at least this particular store did. And I just find it really fascinating. So let's talk about some numbers. All right. So again, what he did is he went through, and apparently this website just listed all of the games that were played per year and the number of sessions that were played throughout the year, and it grouped them by year. And all this person did is he took the top 5 of every year and just listed them with how many sessions that they played in that particular thing. And then at the end, they might talk about some other TTRPGs that are going to show up later on or showed up in previous years, just to go, oh yeah, they used to be number 1, now they're 13th or something like that. So let's go through some data, guys. By the way, I will have a link to this article in the description if you want to read it yourself, or this forum post, I guess. All right, so in 2010, the top 5 RPGs played in this particular cafe that is not identified are from first to last D&D 4th edition with 232 sessions played throughout the year. If we think of people playing weekly sessions, it's 52 weeks in a year. That would mean on average, people were playing 4 games of D&D 4E between 4 and 5 every week, or possibly almost 1 game of D&D 4E every other day, effectively. By far the most popular by a huge margin. The second one, D&D 3.5 with 113 sessions. The third most popular is Orionhod, which is domestic fantasy. It's not a game I'm familiar with, but there's 89 sessions then. Sword World 2.0 was played for 48 sessions. And then the 5th most popular was Double Cross, which is, they just call it Domestic Supers. So I'm assuming it's like a superhero, but also kind of like Ryutama style. You're not like focusing on, Marvel, X-Men fighting Sentinels. There's more domestic stuff, I would assume. And they played 44 sessions. So in 2010, specifically in this particular cafe, D&D 4th edition was by far the most popular game. It wasn't even close. They were more than double D&D 3rd edition. Call of Cthulhu, they specifically talk about Call of Cthulhu is ranked 13th with only 10 sessions played. So we're talking about D&D 4th edition, the one that everybody hated. Secret, nobody hated, or very few people hated D&D 4th edition. It was just a bunch of people that were really, really loud on forums. So in 2010, Call of Cthulhu is barely on the map. Go to 2011. Again, top 5 from 1 to 5. D&D 4e with 203, a little bit less. Aryan Rod, the domestic fantasy one, that one's jumped up to 138. D&D 3.5 has jumped down to 61. Call of Cthulhu is now number 4 with 50 games. And then Parasite Blood, which is domestic horror / supers, is a 33 sessions. So Call of Cthulhu in 1 year jumped from 13th most played to 4th. Going to 2012. 2012, if I remember correctly, was the year that 4th edition was releasing. I think that was when their last few books were coming out. Though it might have been 2013. So anyway, so for 2012, D&D 4th edition, 171 games. Sword World 2.0, 119 games. So Sword World is getting to the point where it's starting to challenge 4th edition and D&D specifically for supremacy. Aryan Rod, 84. Call of Cthulhu, 81. So just barely under Aryan Rod in the 4th spot. So it's still in the 4th slot, but it's getting bigger. Pathfinder, 43. So it took till 2012 for Pathfinder to start getting up. And then D&D 3.5 also 43. And Pathfinder and D&D 3.5 are effectively the same game. We go to 2013. This is where we get the shift. Sword World 2.0, 188 games. They're the number 1 game. D&D 4e is down to 171. It's still fighting for first place, but Sword World is dethroned at that year. Call of Cthulhu has jumped up to 3rd place with 98. Aryan Rod is 60. A new game in 5th place is Metallic Guardian, which is a domestic mecha. Leave it to Japan to come up with a TTRPG with robots. Who would have thought? Get another drink. It is really, really dry in my room right now. And then they also list D&D 3.5 is 54 in 6th place, and then Pathfinder is 43 sessions in 7th place. Now we go to 2014. 2014 is when 5th edition officially launched in the US. They would not have an official release in Japan, I think, until 2016. So officially, you can't buy this in Japan. You have to import it from the US or Europe. So in 2014, number 1 game, Sword World 2.0 with 165 sessions. Second is Metallic Guardian with 125 sessions. Third, D&D 4e with 116 sessions. Fourth is Call of Cthulhu with 61 sessions. So Call of Cthulhu went down a little bit. And then we have D&D 3.5 is 5th with 60 sessions. And then they list the 6th here because it's important. D&D 5th edition had 53 sessions. So even though you couldn't actually buy 5th edition in Japan at this point, people were importing it enough for this store to have it as the 6th most played game. Basically, with 53 sessions, that means at least 1 session a week for D&D 5th edition. And again, it's not even out there. There's not a Japanese translation, nothing. This is just Japanese people importing the English language version and either translating it themselves or, which is apparently very popular in Japan, even with things that do have Japanese translations like Call of Cthulhu and D&D 5th edition now, just playing it in English. So, 2015. Need more drink. 2015, the year after 5th edition has come out everywhere else except Japan. Or I think 2015 might have been when it actually got released in Japan. I don't know. Anyway, number one for 2015, D&D 4th edition with 221 games. Sword World 2.0, 165 games in the 2 slot. Call of Cthulhu, 152 games in the 3rd slot. Metallic Guardians is 4th with 108. Ryutama, which is the Japanese TRPG that I'm probably most familiar with, simply because it's listed as an inspiration for things like Fabula Ultima. I think Break also listed it as one of their kind of inspirations. But it very much has kind of like a Studio Ghibli kind of feel to it. It's a very, very cool game. I believe there's an English translation of it too. Am I wrong? Ryutama. Yeah, you can actually get Ryutama on TTRPG. And it's super expensive at $14. So, so yeah, I like Ryutama. I don't own it yet, but I like it. So anyway, Ryutama, which is again domestic fantasy, 69, nice, in 5th place. 6th place is D&D 3.5 with 42 sessions. 7th place is Pathfinder with 40 sessions. 8th place is D&D 5th edition with 37 sessions. Then 2016 happens. And things massively change. 2016, Call of Cthulhu is the number 1 spot. Now remember, the year before, Call of Cthulhu had a total of 152 sessions in this store. So 2015 is 152. 2014, it was only 61. So they nearly tripled the number of games from 2014 to 2015. We go into 2016, Call of Cthulhu number 1 with 313 sessions. Since 2010 or 2011 2010 when they've been tracking these in this particular store, that is the most sessions played of any tabletop RPG. In there. Before that, I think the highest number we saw was like 232, which was D&D 4th edition. So that's massive, massive, massive. The second most popular is Sword World 2.0, which has 215 sessions. And then D&D 4th edition is 180. One thing that you kind of notice about 4th edition is they shift around a little bit as far as order, but the actual number of games that they run tends to be relatively constant, somewhere between about 170 and about 200, 220. So the amount of people coming in to play D&D 4th edition all the way through 2016 tends to be about the same. It's just other people come in and play other games as well. But they probably, I would guess this store has just a good 4th edition kind of population, because that number is not changing a massive amount. I mean, we're talking about over a year, we're talking about a plus and minus of about 50. So basically one less game per week, or one more or less game per week for 4th edition. Whereas things like Call of Cthulhu drops down to like the sub 50s all the way up to over 300 now, which is really, really amazing. So starting in 2016, this is where Call of Cthulhu becomes massive. Like I said, second was Sword World 2.0 with 215. Third, D&D 4th edition with 180. Fourth is Metallic Guardians with 122. And fifth is Ryutama with 88. And then they have some other stuff. 5e Ties for 7th with 55 sessions. They don't say who it tied with. Pathfinder is at 9th with 44. 3.5 goes all the way down to 16th with only 19. They specifically mention I'll just read directly from it. It should be noted, the Cthulhu tide lifts all boats, in that previously only 25 or so TRPGs had been played in the cafe. In 2016, that doubled to 56 different games. And this is why this is why other games getting popular is so important. Again, the number of people playing 4th edition is in 2016 is very similar to the number of people playing 4th edition in 2021. Again, it's only about a 50 game difference, one less game per week. But because Call of Cthulhu got massive, all these other games got massive, and they doubled the number of TRPGs that were being played in there, which is phenomenally amazing. 2017, number one game, Call of Cthulhu, with 468 games. It is blowing up at this point. Number 2 is Sword World with 219 games. Number 3 is D&D 4E with 136 games. That's the lowest we've seen 4th edition since 2011, or since they started counting this in 2010. Number 4 is a new one, Insane, which is domestic horror, 134 games. And then 5th is D&D 5th edition with 127 games. And then they specifically say in 2017, this marked the year that official translations of 5e released. And this year's ranking holds 76 games. So again, before 2016, before the Cthulhu bomb, before just the absolute explosion that was Call of Cthulhu in 2016, on average, every year you'd see about 25 different tabletop RPGs played in this particular campaign. 2016 jumps up to 56, so it doubled. 2017 jumps up to 76. It is increased by about 50%. So again, really awesome, amazing things, and that's why it's important for other things to get popular, because it rising tide raises all ships and all that stuff. So 2018, the subtitle for this is Cthulhu, appropriately enough, goes insane. In this particular store, Call of Cthulhu had 714 sessions. To put that in perspective, just because I can't do math in my head right now, that means on average, every week, there were between 13 or 14 Call of Cthulhu sessions going on, or roughly 2 per day. Now, more likely than not, because they probably didn't have someone coming on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, more likely than not, that probably meant there was probably like one night or two night where a lot of people came in and probably had like 3 or 4 different Cthulhu games going on, and then the rest were spread out throughout the week, if I had to guess. But that is a ton of games. Call of Cthulhu in 28 probably had more sessions than every other game that was played in 2010. Because again, the number one game was only 232 sessions. We add up the top 5 here. Let's just do some math, because math is fun. So if we add up the top 5 in 2010, 2, 3, 2 plus 1, 3. So 526 games in the top 5, which is going to be the majority of the games in 2010. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say in 2018, there were more Call of Cthulhu games played in this particular store than every single game that was played in 2010. That is amazing. And they have some other stuff. 4E falls to 10th. Pathfinder falls to 12th. I still like the fact that 4E was still more popular than Pathfinder 4 years after it was out of production. 3.5 goes down to 28th. Even more fun. Sword World 2.5 came out in 2018, and it debuted at 9th with 64 sessions, and 86 different TTRPGs were played in 2018. When we get to 2019, Call of Cthulhu, they specifically say not 7th edition, had 769 games, so getting even more popular in 2019. D&D 5th edition comes in 2nd with 395. Insane is 3rd with 330. Double Cross is 4th with 217. Sword World comes in at 5th, or Sword World, specifically Sword World 2.5, comes in at 5th with 164. Then we have a new one that hasn't shown up before. Shinobigami, which is Domestic Modern Ninja, had 137. And then Pathfinder had 115. And then some notes, Sword World 2.0 is still at 10th. So people are still playing 2.0 when there's 2.5 there. It's just not as popular as 2.5 is. The 7th edition of Cthulhu debuts at 30 with only 22 sessions. So they're still playing the 6th edition version of Call of Cthulhu with 769 games. If we add in 7th edition, that actually brings it up to 799 games. Almost 800 games of Call of Cthulhu across 2 different editions. Oh wait, no, sorry. It would be 91. 791. Sorry, it's 22 sessions, not 30 sessions. And there's 94 different TTRPGs played. When we get to 2020, a note here from later on. They put an edit in. I should also note that 2020 and 2021 are the dark times. And while Japan never went full lockdown, that certainly affected the numbers. So you will notice a drop just in the overall number of games played in 2020. So Cthulhu, all editions, now we're counting 7th and 6th together, is 498. Still really large numbers, especially, again, fighting the dark times. D&D 5th edition is 273, so it's in a strong 2nd place. The 3rd one is a new one called Goblin Slayer. Domestic Fantasy Anime Tie-In. Has 160 sessions. Double Cross, 147. Sword World 2.5 is 125. In 6th place is Insane with 111. 7th is Shinobigami with 100. And 8th is Pathfinder with 85. 4E is still being played fairly regularly. It's in 13th place with 49 sessions. 3.5 is 24th with 16 sessions. And 107 different TTRPGs were played in the year 2020 for this particular cafe. When we get to 2021, this is the final year that we have numbers for. D&D all editions is 324. They say most of this is 5e. So we don't know what the breakdown is between 5th edition and 4th edition. However, the 2nd place is Cthulhu all editions with 228. So even if 4th edition, let's say 4th edition was doing a similar number of the games that they did the year before, which is they did 49 sessions the year before, we can probably safely say that 5th edition was being played significantly more than Call of Cthulhu, because knock off 50 and we're still 50 more sessions than Call of Cthulhu. Sword World all editions is in 3rd with 135. Double Cross is 118. 5 is Shadowrun. They just say all editions with 90 sessions. And then Pathfinder is 61. And then for 2021, only 62 different TRPGs were played this year. And I'll just, again, read directly from it. It seems as though the influx of Cthulhu fad brought a bunch of new gamers who tried a lot of different games, but by now the new participants have settled into their preferred games. And then they end it with, of course, this is just one cafe in one city, so the numbers have to be taken with a few grains of salt, but highly interesting nonetheless. So, again, we cannot accurately interpret what the whole Japanese market was doing based on one cafe. Remember how I said in Paizo and Pathfinder Bros claims that Pathfinder was the #1 TTRPG for a while? The way that they're able to get that, and the reason that it's wrong, they never were, was there used to be, I don't know if it's still a thing, but sales numbers for TTRPGs are not actually announced. Not like movies where they go, oh yeah, it got, this much domestic and this much foreign for total box office of this. No, most companies don't actually tell people how many products that they sell of particular things. That's actually proprietary information, and they don't want that information coming out. So the way that, since I think like the 80s, the way that the TTRPG industry in the US has been able to track what games are popular is there is this company that I can't remember what it's called anymore, but what they did is they would call up local game stores and they would ask whoever picks up the phone, what are your most popular games right now? And then they would write that information down and they would publish it. And that's where most people got their ideas of what was the most popular game. And early on in the TTRPG market, it was somewhat accurate due to a number of factors. One, the place where most people were getting their TTRPGs was local game stores. You couldn't go to Walmart and pick up, or Barnes and Noble and pick up a copy of D&D. You had to go there. So they were talking to the places that were selling the books the most. And I believe they did everything that they could to try and control as many variables as possible. But it's still a very inaccurate poll. Calling up whomever was working that day and asking them, well, what are you guys selling? First of all, it would only work for stores with landlines, which, again, in the 80s, that was all stores. As you get further and further and further, stores using their landlines a lot gets more and more kind of relative. I would assume most brick and mortar stores have a landline still. Even today, but there was a lot of other ways to get in contact with people that tended to be more reliable than just calling up the store and talking to some random person. The second thing that was is they weren't asking for managers, they weren't asking for specific sales numbers, because again, most stores won't give out that information. It's proprietary information, and it can get you fired if you give out that information. So they were just asking, hey, what's your most popular games and stuff like that. And so the person that was selling it, or the person picking it up, might have a bias of their own. It might be that, Pathfinder was their favorite thing. And so, from that particular report, for 3 quarters in, I think it was 2013, it was like quarter 3, or 2, 3, and 4 in 2013. Maybe it was quarters 1, 2, and 3. Pathfinder was technically, according to this thing, outselling D&D. Now, the thing that makes it not true, first of all, D&D hadn't published any books for over a year at that point, because 4th edition had stopped publishing books. So they weren't really competing with D&D. Second of all, D&D 4th edition was sold in Walmart. D&D 4th edition was sold on Amazon. It was sold in Barnes and Noble. None of those places were polled for this. Pathfinder was, I think it was sold in, at that point, I would be very much surprised if it wasn't sold in some way on Amazon, but it wasn't sold in Walmart. It wasn't sold in Barnes and Noble, not to my knowledge. So that number is highly inaccurate. 4th edition was still outselling Pathfinder oodles and oodles and oodles and oodles. The best year that Paizo's ever had, I think they did a little over like $1 million or something like that. Or no, maybe it was, I can't remember. They've never come close. So anyway, that's the same problem that we have here. We're looking at a single store, and this is self-reported. We have no reason to think that these aren't accurate for that particular store, but again, we can't be sure that this store is actually reflective of the entire market, but it does show something interesting. The market is going to affect a store, no matter how insulated it is. The market is going to affect it, and we saw starting in 2016. Cthulhu got crazy big. And what was happening in 2015, 2016? Well, YouTube was becoming significantly more popular. My understanding, the reason that Call of Cthulhu is such a juggernaut, though it may not be the juggernaut that everyone claims it is now, I don't know because I can't find any numbers. But the reason that it is, one of the reasons it was so popular is replays, which are basically kind of logs of TRPG games, were really popular, and when YouTube started becoming really big, and I think there's a Japanese version of YouTube that they use that I can't remember what it's called, but when that started getting really big, instead of trying to like write it down and then finding a place to publish it, they would publish video replays of their games, and Cthulhu video replays went crazy. And so that was one of the reasons that Call of Cthulhu got as big as it did. The other thing that I found really, really interesting in my research for this is the types of games that people play are very, very different in Japan versus the U.S. In the U.S., unless you are focusing on like the convention scene, in the U.S., it is kind of expected when you're playing a TTRPG, you are playing a campaign. One-shots are for like special events and, just pick up and play games. But what people really want to be playing and what people are playing is campaigns. In Japan, it's the exact opposite. One-shots reign supreme. The thing that I keep seeing over and over and over again in all these different articles talking about the style of gaming in Japan is the fact that Japanese people are very, very busy. Something I actually learned in college for my business degree. The work culture in Japan is exceptionally different from the work culture in the U.S. In the U.S., you are effectively, at least modern U.S., you are effectively expected. You expect your business to attempt to take advantage of you as much as physically possible, and so on the flip side, you will do everything that you can to take advantage of your employer. You will, negotiations and stuff like that are based on the idea that he's going to try, the employer's going to try and pay me the least amount of money physically possible, and I am going to try and get them to pay me the most amount of money physically possible, and eventually we will come up with something in the middle that neither of us is really happy about, but we can accept. That's how most people view your job in the U.S. Corporate is a 4-letter word. And the managers are the bad people, and the employees are just beaten down and abused and things like that. That's not how it is in Japan. In Japan, the work culture, you are not only expected to make significant sacrifices for your job, you actually can't quit your job. Your boss has to allow you to quit. And if you attempt to quit and your boss doesn't like your reasoning, they can just deny you quitting and you have to continue working there. To the point where I believe, and again, people in Japan, feel free to correct me on anything I get wrong here. I believe there are actually companies that their sole purpose is to help people quit. Like their job is like, okay, we're going to set this up so that you can quit. Yes, this is so. The Japanese job market is very, very different. The employer-employee relationship is very, very different because again, the employee is expected to sacrifice and work really, really hard and make the business look good. The business is also supposed to take care of their employees, which is not a thing that a lot of people think happens here. It does happen here, especially in small businesses. but it's not something in the U.S. market that a lot of people think about, whereas that's a really big thing. I've seen a lot of people talk about the fact that I think Nintendo is having a rough year, and instead of firing a bunch of employees, if I remember correctly, Miyamoto just took a cut to his pay to be able to keep all the employees. And a lot of American workers immediately went, well, look, see, that's how art, like in the US, people get fired all the time because the business isn't doing well. And what should be happening is the executives should be taking pay cuts. And that's just not how that's not how the markets work. If you want the U.S. to work more like Japanese market, then you also have to accept that the employer-employee relationship would have to drastically change, and you no longer get to quiet quit, or to take hour-long lunches because, well, they're paying me, or do the least amount of work physically possible. Nope. You also don't get to quit when things don't go your way. That's the trade-off. So anyway, the idea that Japanese people are very busy, that tracks for my understanding of just kind of Japanese culture in general. Everybody's working, everyone's real busy. So the idea that one-shots being really, really big kind of makes this sense. It also kind of explains another reason why Call of Cthulhu is as popular as it is. Call of Cthulhu, the game itself, is not designed to be a game that you play for years upon years. It is designed for short little mini campaigns. Because that's, if you've ever read any of Lovecraft's work, the characters, the investigators and stuff like that, they don't last very long. Like, it's cosmic horror. Bad things are always happening, and if you survive to the end, you're really, really lucky. So Call of Cthulhu is designed for shorter stories and things like that. There's also a very good chance that at least one or more characters will die in a session. So not getting attached to a character that you've been playing for 7-8 years. Well, that kind of makes sense. Does that mean that's always how it's been? No, again, the first replay that still exists, somebody actually went, I think on Internet Archive, somebody actually went and translated the original Record of Lodoss War replays into English. So if you wanted to actually read them, you can. I've read through a few of them. They're fascinating. But that eventually turned into an anime series. And they played those characters for years. To the point where the first version of Sword World was them basically getting annoyed with the basic set, or the BECMI. I think at that point it would have been BECMI. D&D books, because they just didn't give them enough. And so they created their own system so they could continue telling their stories. The first version of Sword World, which I believe came out in '89, the campaign setting was set in a world that included Lodoss, which was an island that the Record of Lodoss War, all that stuff took place on. So early on, the idea of long campaigns and stuff like that was kind of the norm, because the Record of Lodoss War was meant to be kind of the typical thing. It wasn't typical because there's a bunch of authors playing it, but still. But nowadays, one-shots rule. And that's why these TRPG cafes are such a big deal. Because due to everything being one-shots, these cafes are perfect for coming in. You play your one-shot, you have some food, and then you go home and, live the rest of your life. You don't have to worry about, okay, when's the next session going to be? You just kind of come into the store and you play the game. You might have a regular group that you play with. You might just kind of come in and see who's there. I actually don't know that particular aspect of the culture. Again, any Japanese fans, you want to fill in the blanks here, be very, very appreciative. But I do remember running I ran games in friendly local game stores for years. And it really was, you just kind of show up and you see what's going on. And sometimes there was campaigns that were ongoing, and sometimes it was one-shots and two-shots and things like that. But yeah, so this one forum post has completely blown my mind with the idea of I think it's very, very possible that Call of Cthulhu is not the absolute number one most popular TTRPG in the Japanese market. I think it's one of the most popular. But when we look at this, I think it's equally possible that 5th edition, especially since they've been having Japanese translations of 5th edition since 2017, so we're going on almost 10 years of Japanese language versions of it. And I believe the 2014 versions launched with translations relatively soon after the English versions came out, if I remember correctly. So I believe they already have the 2024 revisions and have had them for over a year. And again, I also know a lot of people in Japan play D&D in English and Call of Cthulhu in English, despite the fact that Call of Cthulhu has been putting out Japanese translations since, I think, 89 or something like that. Like, there's another reason why Call of Cthulhu is popular over there. The people that make it have supported the Japanese market, whereas TSR and then Wizards of the Coast, their support of the Japanese market has been a little bit flaky. So like I said, I find it really, really fascinating. I think, based on what I've seen here, I think something that we can interpret from this is, I would almost guarantee the Japanese market, when you look at per capita gaming, is probably more diverse than the American market by a pretty large margin. When you look at how quickly new games just show up and are in the top 5 games played at this cafe instantly, like that's a good indicator that they are playing a lot more different TTRPGs. There's also a lot of Japanese only TTRPGs. So there is a thriving or TRPG market over there. There's a lot of Japanese game designers that are making Japanese TRPGs that we never see over here. But I just I think the one thing that we can pull from this for certain, I think the diversity in the Japanese TRPG market is much bigger than the U.S. market, despite the fact that the U.S. market is many, many times larger than the Japanese market. So we probably have more different games that are being played here. Like, let's, at this one, at their top, I think 107 different TRPGs were played in this particular cafe. So if this particular cafe existed in the U.S., if we were to look at these numbers, something comparable in the U.S., I would say we might have a similar number of different TTRPGs played over here, in the 100 to 150 range. However, the number of people playing non-D&D or big 3 TTRPGs would be significantly lower. I think the main weight of where players would be way up here in the most popular, would be significantly heavier weighted than everything on the bottom. Whereas here, if I had to take a guess, which I'm going to do right now, I think a lot more people are playing non-Cthulhu, D&D 5e, or Sword World. Those are the 3 big ones that show up in just about every one of these things. I would say a lot more people are playing non-big 3 than in the U.S. market, where 50% of the U.S. market is just Dungeons and Dragons, or over 50%. The majority of the people that are playing TTRPGs in D&D are playing D&D, or are playing TTRPGs in the U.S. or playing D&D, specifically D&D 5th edition. If we add in 4th edition and 3rd edition, we probably could jump that up to 60 or 70% of the market is playing some flavor of Dungeons and Dragons. It's exceptionally popular here. So that means that the remaining, 30 to 40% of the market splits up all the different TTRPGs. And we are in a TTRPG renaissance. There are so many different ones that exist that you can play. And we just keep seeing more really awesome ones just showing up and doing exceptionally well. It's one of the nice things about a massive market like the US is that a lot of different products can compete and exist, whereas in smaller markets, you really, really have to fight for each sale. So yeah, like I said, I found it really fascinating. I thought you guys might too. Interested to hear from you guys. First of all, I would really love to hear from my foreign players. Anyone that is not US based. What is your anecdotal experience in your corner of the market? Like, where are you from? You don't have to be like, I am, this is my exact address. But something like, yeah, I'm in the European market, or I'm in the Brazilian market. If you want to, you could go the South American if you don't want to label your country of origin. But I think just narrowing it down to just your country would probably be as accurate as we really need it to be. So where roughly are you from, and what do you see people playing the most of? I would love to hear that. Also, if there's any quirks about your particular thing, like again, TRPG cafes are not a thing. Technically there are a few of them in the US, but they're novelties. They're really just not a thing here in the US. We do have friendly local game stores where people play, but I would say the vast majority of games in the US are either home games or convention games. And that probably makes up like 80 or 90% of games in the US. So I'd be interested to hear from different places. And again, I know specifically Grimace, because you've talked about it before, you're in Japan, or at least were for at least some period of time. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this data and whether or not you think that this is an outlier, or you think that this is relatively close to what people are actually playing in Japan. Again, let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that is all for today, and I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.